Well, hello. Welcome to this overview of the critical thinking assignment for Chem 110. And so this is paired with a couple of changes that have come to Blackboard for us. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So what I'm showing here is this is the assignment description that for what you're going to have to do. And so the overall idea is going back to now chapter 5. We were talking in chapter 5 about the ways that nuclear substances decay. And we touched on just a little bit about nuclear power itself. And so what I want to do and what I want you to do is we're building around this scenario and we need a little bit of context for it. So the context is this: nuclear power is about 20% of our electricity in the United States. And overall, there are roughly 100 reactors operating at a number of different sites across the country, 63 of them in total. And you can see that for the most part, most of those reactors are collected here on the eastern half of the Mississippi River, including quite a few in Illinois, but none right now in Indiana, none right now in Kentucky, and none really south of I-64 here in Illinois. So one of the things that we as a culture have started to look into is we know that from a greenhouse standpoint, that coal-fired power plants are generally dirty in terms of they do let out carbon dioxide. They do put other things into the air because the coal, regardless of how much we clean it up, still is not just pure carbon. There are other elements in there as well that would go up into the atmosphere when we burn the coal to create electricity. And there are some sustainability issues potentially. Coal is, still relatively abundant, especially in this area. There's a big tie to coal mining here in this region of the world and this part of the United States, but it's starting to get harder to mine and it's starting to get harder to pull out of the ground, and it's becoming a little bit more dangerous to do so. So over the past 20 years or so, there have been pushes, different ways of trying to figure out what are some ways to get us to go off of fossil fuels. And one of the ways that has been proposed has been nuclear power, as opposed to wind energy or solar energy, which we do use here in Indiana. There are wind farms and solar farms. Wind farms tend to be more in the northern part of the state. Solar farms, we are seeing a number of them cropping up over in some of the southern parts of the state. So why nuclear? Well, as we can see here, nuclear power does have some advantages. There are fewer greenhouse emissions. So compared to coal, it works out a little bit better. As an energy source, it is relatively inexpensive. The downside to wind and solar is that they can be really expensive to put up and maintain. And they're not weather dependent. Whereas solar and wind are very weather dependent. Wind has to blow in a certain direction, it has to blow at a certain speed in order to operate those windmills, and the sun has to be shining in order to generate enough light to cause the photoreceptors to generate electricity. But there are downsides to nuclear power as well. Because we are dealing with uranium, we have to go into the process of mining uranium. We have to find the uranium and bring it in. It can be kind of expensive to mine and transport. Because of the reactions that are taking place inside of the power plants, they are a target for terrorism. And the waste that is generated by them can last hundreds of years. If a breach were to happen in any kind of serious way, it could have really nasty health effects on people. It could have really bad effects on the environment. And we're not necessarily even talking about a Chernobyl kind of level of disaster. Even smaller nuclear power issues have cropped up on occasions. And the areas in and around it, have had short-term kinds of effects, but also there have been longer-term kinds of impacts as well. So there are a couple of things I want you to do here. Obviously, this map gives us an idea of where nuclear power already exists. These videos here, if you click on them, will take you to some short videos that talk about how nuclear power works and what a light water reactor is, because that is what the nuclear power plants that exist in North America and actually all over the world, that's what they are. So these two links kind of get you into, how a nuclear power plant works, how it utilizes nuclear fission to generate electricity. So probably a good idea to just watch those, get an idea of how the whole process works, because that'll help you to understand the advantages and disadvantages a little bit better. But the scenario itself that we're looking at is this. You've got the Department of Energy. Department of Energy wants to build a nuclear power plant within 10 miles of where you live. The land has already been bought. They are already doing some preliminary work to develop the site into a area that is proper for an electrical power plant to exist. But before construction can begin, the surrounding communities have to approve the power plant in a local referendum. So people have to go to the voting box and vote for whether or not they want the power plant in the area. And so power of the people here, they have the ability to say no or to say yes. And so what you're going to do, taking these advantages and disadvantages into consideration, you're going to advance your knowledge. So you're going to do some research. I've given you some videos here. There are a few more at the bottom of this document. You're going to research what is nuclear power, how does it work, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. You're going to go out into the news. You're going to go out into the library. You're going to go and do some real research on this, and you're going to build your arguments. And I need you to build both arguments, not just yes, this is good or no, this is bad, but also the opposite side. Because ultimately, to make an informed decision, you need to know what the arguments are on both sides. You can't just say, you know what, I don't like that it's here. I don't want to vote against, I don't want to vote for it. That's the end of the argument. That's really not doing your due diligence as a person, as a scientist, as a member of the community. So you're going to further your knowledge of nuclear power. You're going to dig deeper into some of the research. There's a lot of news clippings out there. There's a lot of opinion pieces, but there's also a lot of factual evidence as well. And I'll go over some of the places where we can find some of that information, because that is going to be ultimately what sets you apart in terms of being able to do this assignment successfully versus not doing as well as you could. And in addition to this research, we also need to look at this from an ethical kind of point of view, an ethical standpoint. So for this, you're going to look at what are called the 8 key questions. The 8 key questions are these right here. Fairness, outcomes, responsibilities, character, liberty, empathy, authority, rights. These are the 8 kind of perspectives that we can bring to an ethical moral decision that need to be addressed. Now, I will warn you, not all 8 of these viewpoints are actually terribly relevant to the discussion that you want to do. Some of them are definitely more relevant than others. So, for example, I would be very shocked to find any of you not referencing outcomes in some kind of way in your assignment, because this is a very outcomes-based decision. Do we choose the nuclear power plant with the outcomes of getting reliable power for years, getting relatively inexpensive cost electricity? And in the process, do we look at the outcomes of, well, if I don't need to mine coal anymore, because we're no longer going to use the coal-fired power plant that all of Southern Indiana and Illinois uses, if I'm not going to use that, then what does that mean for the local coal industry? Those are outcomes as well. Do we need all the mining companies here? What happens to those people if the mining gets shut down in this area? What do they do with their lives? So those are all outcomes-based kinds of ideas. And on the flip side, if we don't build the nuclear power plant, what are some of the outcomes associated with that? Okay, we can look at from the standpoint, okay, we're not going to have the nuclear power. That's going to be a positive outcome in terms of we're not going to have any potential threats for nuclear violence. We're not going to have any potential issues associated with nuclear waste or decay. But at the same time, in the long term, there might be consequences and outcomes around the fact that the coal supply is not unlimited, that it is going to get more and more dangerous to go after that coal than it is even right now. So outcomes is something that is very, very, very relevant in this particular discussion. And so there are going to be certain perspectives that are going to be more consequential, more relevant than others. And so what I want you to do is, as you're going through the research, you're really not going to be able to evaluate these 8 key questions until you get a better understanding of what the problem is and what the arguments are for and against. But once you have kind of those established, then you can start to look at those 8 key questions and say, okay, what 3 questions really stand out as being the questions that are the most relevant? And so to get full credit, you have to go after 3 of these key questions. And so what I've seen in the past when I've given this assignment in other classes has been people just kind of go down the line. Okay, here's an example of fairness. Here's an example of outcomes. Here's an example of responsibilities. And they try to address every single one of them, but they do a poor job at addressing any of them. And they end up not doing well because instead of really focusing on 3 and developing them out into really good perspective arguments, they try to address everything really broadly. And they end up making really no points whatsoever about any of the ideas. They just kind of say in a quick sentence, okay, fairness, it's not fair that someone's gonna have to give up their land for this. Okay, that's, I guess, true, but in this scenario, the land's already bought and paid for. That's off the table. What else you got? So really take this part of the essay seriously and look at things from that perspective and trying to do as much as you can to really develop three of these questions, three of these perspectives well, more than a sentence or two. Really attack them and come at them with some really good ideas. Okay, so some timeline, some assignment parameters. So here are some things that I'm including to kind of kickstart your research. So these videos are from the same series as the first that I highlighted. This is the Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. And they're good. They're also very brief. This TED Talks debate is actually a really interesting one. It's longer. It's, nearly 26 minutes. But what's interesting about it is the debate here is scaled a little bit differently. It's scaled a little bit differently. Instead of looking at nuclear power versus fossil fuels, it's looking at nuclear power versus wind and solar and geothermal. So the man pictured on the screen is a researcher from Stanford, and he has been developing different kinds of wind turbines, as well as some other kinds of ways to harness energy from natural resources, like the wind, like the sun, like geothermal energy, like tidal wave using the tides to generate energy. He's an expert. The other guy who's not pictured is also an expert, and presents some really interesting reasoning for why nuclear power is the preferred methodology. So it's a really interesting video, gives you some pretty good insights. The other link that I'm going to give you is if you go to our library page, from the main library page here, the 1VU search is probably your best option, because you can start here and with a quick search. Now you'll have to wade through some of this because there's going to be a lot of stuff here, and some of it is not actually at all what you want. But you can look here and see, okay, let's look at just full text and open access stuff. And so here's an ebook about the Fukushima disaster in Japan, which was in 2011. Here is some information from just about 8 years ago about some nuclear power meltdowns. So some of this stuff is like really high level kinds of research, and maybe that's not what we want to do. Maybe we want to, let's just take it down. And this isn't actually what we wanted. So you can play around with your search parameters here, and you can kind of get what you want. The other thing that you could do is if you go into Google Scholar, so start here. And here you have access to a whole bunch of stuff that you can download. So here is here's an article talking about nuclear power and policy in Turkey and public perception of it. You can look at just pros and cons. And these are coming from government websites. These are coming from research journals. These are coming from more authoritative sources compared to if I just went straight to Google. Yes, first hit, Department of Energy. Yeah, perfectly good website. You start going down a little bit more, and now you're going to get into, so these are good sites here. Spring Power and Gas. Yep. They might present some good information. They also might have some biases involved because they are an energy company. So, you kind of have to take the good and the bad here. So what we want to do is we want to look at some different kinds of resources to help answer these questions. Now, the assignment itself that you have to do is going to be broken up into a number of different parts. And so there are going to be a total of 4 assignments that you're going to have to complete with this. And the reason there are 4 assignments instead of just 1 is I'm trying to break it down into smaller pieces for you so that it's not just something that we say, okay, here's your project, it's due at the end of the semester, go. But instead, it's something that we're working on piece by piece, incrementally. There's a small assignment to do the first week, a small assignment to do the second week, rough draft a little bit after that. I give you feedback, you turn it around, and you give me the final submission before the last day of class. So that's what the structure is here. So our first deadline is a minimum of 4 resources, and this is due in Blackboard by March 20th. And so this is where we can go to the Blackboard page. And we can see that on the Blackboard page, this document that I'm highlighting everything on is present right here. You can download that at any time. And in addition, we've got kind of a basic mock-up of the assignment and what it's intended to do. So your first assignment is this resources assignment. That resources assignment is due on March 20th. All I want from you out of that research assignment is this. Go find a few articles. You need to have a total of 6 for the final paper. I'm looking for 4 here. Now, if you've got more than that, present more than that. Present whatever you have. But at a minimum, I want 4 resources presented by March 20th. And it's not just give me 4 websites or 4 links to to files. No, I want you to show that you've actually read the articles and that you understand what they say, and that you have an idea of how you might use them. And so this is kind of an annotated resource. So what I want you to do, present the citation. So give me the citation in MLA form, and then write a brief description, couple of sentences at minimum, up to a paragraph, saying this is what the article was about. This is the information that is presented. Here's how I think I'm going to use it. So first assignment, take, if you're watching this on March 13th, the day we come back from break, then you've got a week to complete this. Get into the research, find some articles, familiarize yourselves, read them, write a quick summary of each one. The second assignment, the preliminary arguments assignment. This is where I want you to take some of those research articles, some of those resources, and hopefully you've added to them by this point. And I want you to start to build the arguments. So I haven't shown you this document yet, but the actual assignment that you submit can come in one of two forms. So the form that I am showing here, this is one of the formats that you can use. So you can submit this as a traditional essay, and the parameters for the traditional essay are given in the assignment description. 12-point font, black text, one of the three readable fonts that I give you, Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri. Any of those three are okay. So you can write a traditional essay that addresses all of these kinds of questions in just one long form essay. That's how you write. If that's how you want to present it, go for it. No problem whatsoever with doing that. But keeping in with this idea of kind of chunking things out, I've got another format that you can use. And so the format here is this answer sheet, where I've taken the 5-6 sections that you're supposed to address, and I've converted them into a series of paragraphs that you are going to write where you address certain prompts. So in part 1 here, what is the moral and ethical issue that you're facing? This is a question that after you just find out a little bit more about nuclear power, you can answer that question really easy. Take you a paragraph, maybe 2, to do it. One of those things that you can do it, put the assignment aside for a while, come back to it later. The second assignment is addressing this second bullet point, the opposing viewpoints on nuclear energy. And what I'm looking for in here is, I'm looking for you to present good, solid arguments for both sides of the debate. At minimum, it should be 1 paragraph for each side of the debate. You might find that you get into the research and you're looking at what you want to do. It might be more than that. But I want you to address the positive side. I want you to address the negative side. And I want you to address if there is a gray area or multiple gray areas, a position that people could end up taking in the middle, and what that position ultimately looks like. Now, granted, at the end of this process, you can't take the gray area because you have to vote yes or no. You don't get the option of abstaining. You don't get the option of sitting out. You have to either vote yes for the nuclear power plant or no for the nuclear power plant. But in this argument, you could recognize that there are people who are going to be genuinely on the fence, and here's what they think. So that secondary assignment, which is due on March 27th. So 1 week following the initial submission of these resources. That's a 15-point assignment. And then shortly after that, I've put that as April 6th. Reason I'm using April 6th is April 7th is a university holiday. And with my philosophy around holidays, I don't want this, ordinarily I would make this due on a Sunday or on the following Monday, but I don't want you to be kind of pressed into working on that over a holiday weekend and a break. So we're going to have it due on that Thursday night. So April 6th, you have to have a draft of the complete assignment. So that means that you either fill out this entire form, you fill out all 6 of the sections, which hopefully, you're working on piece by piece over the course of the next couple of weeks. And you submit the complete assignment into Blackboard. I am giving myself about 2 weeks. Friday the 21st will be the day where I will submit those back to you, if not sooner, hopefully sooner. And that'll give you about 10 days at minimum to make changes and modifications. The final submissions are due on April 30th. April 30th is the Sunday before finals week. And the reason I'm choosing that particular date is just to kind of maximize the amount of time. So I'm trying to spread this assignment out over 2 months instead of over like 2 or 3 weeks. So that's the reason why we're stretching everything out a little bit here. And so ultimately, yes, the final draft is due on the 30th, which would be, right before finals week. We don't have a test that week before finals week. Our 4th exam is actually a week or maybe 2 ahead of that deadline. So we don't have any of those other big assignments to worry about. And honestly, if you do a really good job with the draft by April 6th, hopefully there isn't a whole lot to fix. In fact, I've had a number of students in the past, they get their preliminary score on, and I will give you, so the 20 points is a completion-based 20 points. Do you fill out all the sections kind of thing? But I will also give you a preliminary score out of 85. So I will grade the assignment using the rubric and let you know where you stand. And I've had students in the past that said, you know what? I got a 73 out of 85. I'm good with that. I'm not going to make any changes. And so they end up resubmitting the whole thing intact without any edits. And, they're done. They say, okay, I know what score I'm going to get. I'm fine with that. And then they just resubmit again. Some people obviously have more to do and will do those extra things, to help. So ultimately, we're going to be doing the bulk of this assignment over the course of a month, but the editing and resubmission process is going to take another 3 weeks, basically. So the question form is basically just this broken out into sections. If you write an essay, you'll just structure your essay in this kind of way. It'll have basically 6 sections: an introduction, the opposing viewpoints, the influences and biases, which includes the ethical dimensions of the eight key questions, the personal position statement, where you actually make a decision one way or the other about what you are going to do. Are you going to vote yes, or are you going to vote no, and why are you going to do that? And then a conclusion section. And then the 6th section is the works cited, where you take all of that information that you cited throughout the paper and you just put it all in MLA format, lay it out real smooth. Grading rubric. This will be there in Blackboard as well. You can see that the grading rubric basically has 4 different slots. So what gets done, how it gets done, this will affect how you are ultimately graded. And I will give you so for the preliminary arguments, for example, your preliminary arguments, I'm going to be using this section of the rubric to evaluate how well you made your arguments and give you an idea. Okay, this is what I need to improve. This is what I need to work off of, so on. So that's this assignment. And so, like I said before, if we go to, Blackboard here, you can see that under your assignments link, there is now an active link here for the critical and ethical thinking assignment. In there, you have the full description of the assignment. So that link will give you this document that I've been showing you. And then you've got the 4 assignment links here, which are given the 4 different colors. And they all have their own set due dates on them. So if you have any questions about the assignments themselves, please feel free to ask. I'm also going to drop in the Blackboard site a discussion board where if you've got questions about this or about items that are going on in lecture right now, please send those in as soon as you can so that I can address them at our next class meeting. But without further ado, I am going to close this off and just thank you in advance for the work that you're going to do on this assignment. I know it's going to be a lot on you, but I think you'll find that this assignment is interesting and is going to take you into some knowledge that you didn't necessarily have, but stuff that is going to become a lot more relevant as we move on into the next 5, 10, 15 years. So have a good day. I'll see you in class, and good luck.